Bullshit.
Pretend for a moment we've entered a parallel universe, free of bullshit and full of bold solutions. That's what the No BS show is all about. I'm your host, Dave Mastovich. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/nobs. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. And now, let's cut the bullshit. When it comes to getting things done with people, ambiguity breeds mediocrity. Employees and managers alike become frustrated when expectations aren't met. The problem often arises because of a breakdown in communication. The more ambiguous goals and expectations are, the greater the chance for an average or worse outcome. The key takeaway for everyone on the team is that effective communication is a two-way street. In some cases, employees don't clearly understand goals and expectations, and they don't take the time to clarify the situation with their boss. In other instances, employees are consciously or subconsciously comfortable with the ambiguity. They avoid clarity and are content to do what they think is necessary because when ambiguity exists, accountability is reduced or eliminated. On the other hand, supervisors are often guilty of thinking they're on the same page as their team, when in reality they have not provided the necessary specifics to ensure success. Or they don't empower employees to think and make decisions that could improve outcomes. Leaders need to provide clear direction and ensure clarity of expectations. They should talk openly with team members about what the outcome of the project should be, when it will be completed, and what employees should do if help is needed or when they hit an inevitable roadblock. Managers should involve the employees in setting deadlines as well. Often employees will offer a tighter deadline than the manager expected. If they ask for a later deadline, you at least gain an understanding of why they think more time is necessary, and you find out sooner rather than later. Ultimately, leaders should use a combination of communication tactics rather than just a meeting, email, or telephone call. Combining face-to-face and written correspondence gives team members the benefit of both verbal and nonverbal communication, the chance to interact, and specific details in writing. We're all most comfortable with one form of communication, which our guest will talk about as part of our natural needs and behaviors. We have to move out of that comfort zone and make sure we're trying to communicate with each team member in their optimal way of communicating. If you're the person receiving the instructions, you too have a responsibility to clearly define the expectations. Repeat back to the leader what you think is expected and obtain agreement on goals, expectations, and action steps to be completed. Ask what you should do when you encounter that bump in the road, because you know it inevitably will happen. Move off the path to mediocrity. Communicate clearly, reduce ambiguity, and make a commitment to excellence. Our guest today is Eric Guy, a licensed social worker and a nationally acclaimed speaker, and most recently, an author of a brand new book, The Life of Victory. He's senior partner of Predictive Synergistic Systems and founder of the Center for Victory. Eric, welcome to the show.
Great to have. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you having me and looking forward to today.
Awesome. So let's start it off with you telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, your career path.
Okay, so you mentioned that I'm licensed social worker. That's kind of how it all started off. I was a licensed therapist, so doing that kind of work. Didn't want to really take on the natural model of that, and didn't want to go down the road of just billing people, billing insurance. I found that very just monotonous and saw treatment differently. So started coming up with my own program. So in the early 2000s, really set out to carve my own way and created a program, which is just, I call an intensive in-home. It's where I actually go in, I stay with people for a period of days, and we work real intensively on what's going on in the relationships with each other, spouses, kids, things like that. Why did I say that and tell you that is because that's what all started me with the analytics side, the behavioral analytics side that you spoke of a little bit earlier. those people who were naturally paying for that were C-level people. And they said, hey, can you come do that in my home? Not only in my home, but in my business. And the home was okay. The business was like, I'm not sure if I want to do that. And then I kept getting prodded and pushed. So finally I said, hey, I can't go in and guess everybody's personality. It looks kind of weird. So what I did was I got trained in more behavioral analytics to go in and actually be more accurate with what was going on, how to get around the communication issues, what people needed, the right role, how to manage people, how to lead people and give people what they need out of their environment. And met my business partner, Dan Corser. And then, like they say, the rest was history. We built the company at Predictive Synergistics, and we've seen growth every year. But a lot of the things that I got trained and inundated with early on, I pull from in my ability to really produce a good solution for clients as far as the work environment goes. So that's a little bit about my background and career path.
Well, let's talk schooling. What was the college education? Where'd you go and why?
Went to Westminster College. Why? Football scholarship. So got paid for. The undergrad was criminal justice and sociology. So studied that with the thinking that I would just get out and do that. And found during an internship my senior year that I was really good at very chaotic situations. I did an internship at a full lockdown unit with kids, the worst of the worst in Pennsylvania. And the executive director pulled me aside and said, you don't know it, but you have a gift. I've set up an appointment. He actually set up an appointment for me down here in Pittsburgh with the chair of the University of Pittsburgh social work program. Didn't want to do it, mostly because I'm not very, very good at taking standardized tests. So I was going to have to take the GRE to get to the school. But got around some of those things and met with him. Decided to go into the program, and all of a sudden now I'm a licensed therapist. So did my graduate work here in Pittsburgh and just took off.
Okay, so I have to go back on a bunch of different questions.
Okay.
First, just the sports guy in me has to ask, what position did you play in football?
Okay, so high school was...
where was you in high school? Where'd you go to high school?
It was just down the road in Washington County, McGuffey High School. Okay. So played defensive back and running back, and really just didn't come off the field. Just loved the game. I loved... I think more what I loved was the team, and talking about how people treat you. Regardless of what they say about those coaches, then they really gave me what I needed to excel. And I think the transition to college, why I fell out of love with the sport was it wasn't scratching the itch anymore. It felt like work all the time. It didn't feel fun anymore. There wasn't so much emphasis on team, even though it was there. I mean, it was there in some aspects, but I think the bigger part was really having a coach that didn't understand where I was coming from. And, the other piece of that is me not understanding where they're coming from. I thought it was just going to be the same. So that was kind of a big revelation.
Did you have to switch positions?
I switched back and forth quite a few times just because I think I was just a troublemaker. A lot of times it ended up being more on the defensive side of the ball than anything else.
Did you play all 4 years at Westminster?
I did not. I played 3 years, went to get a checkup my fourth year. Already had several surgeries, several concussions, and the knee surgeries were the big thing. Went to the orthopedic surgeon just as a checkup, as I would do every year, and he said, look, even if you don't play, we're going to have to operate on one or both of your knees again. You have to decide whether it's worth it or not. And at that point, I just decided it's probably not worth it to continue to play. But it was good. It ended well.
You had to be fast. What was your 40 time?
4.3.
So that's like draft material, NFL draft material, 4.3.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. I just ran it once, though. It was never timed other than that. So,
but let's say it was off. Let's say it was off a little bit, because a lot of times that's what people will say, like that. You take your best time and it's over. But even if it was 4.4, 4.45, that's still.
It was probably more in the 4 or 5 range.
Yeah.
But, still quick. Maybe not as quick today as I was back then, but still quick.
Okay. You're at Westminster. You played the football in high school, played football at Westminster. You're going through the program and you're getting a degree, and your degree was going to be in social work, was it?
Sociology and criminology.
Criminology, that's right, criminology. Okay, so now you're in criminology and you get an internship and you're at a lockdown facility. Mm-hmm. So is it like a juvenile detention center?
It's a full lockdown. It's not just, it's a prison.
So it's a prison.
It's a prison. Inside of that is a full lockdown unit.
And where was the prison?
That was up north, towards Newcastle.
Okay. So you're working at a prison, which the average 19, 20, 21-year-old is going to say, like, what's up with this? And you fit in, and you're actually excelling enough that the person that you're working for submits you for
not just
an
the
interview.
person I'm working for, the whole guy that was running the whole show.
Okay.
There.
So he
saw that.
Submits you to, he sees your natural abilities.
Mm-hmm.
You go to this and you're like uncomfortable with this interview, and then you have to take the GRE, and you then end up going into the master's program there?
I did. Yeah. Actually didn't have to take the GRE. That was the nice thing.
Okay. See, you got rid of some BS.
I got rid of some BS.
Now, we talk a lot how first jobs and internships matter. So talk about that internship, because it obviously set the tone for the early part of your career, and then talk about your first job.
So that job was just, it felt natural. It was, so if I go back even farther, just my own history, I mean, I was involved in the juvenile justice system before I was a teenager. So, part of it was just instinctive. It was like, okay, why do we do this to kids and families? Why do we do the kind of things that we do when it didn't feel right to me? Mm-hmm. So, some of it is just intuitive by nature and instinctual. And I had a couple really great teachers in undergrad and graduate work that really kind of led me down the path as I am able to do for others now. It was, it's really nothing that I've created. People have just handed it down, and I was just fortunate enough to have kind of the right people in the right places at the right time that just kind of pulled me aside and said, hey, you've got something here. This is how I think you should use it. And it's not like every time I had the epiphany that, oh yeah, you're right. It was just hearing it over and over and over and over again, and really finding my genius and my greatness in what I wanted to do, my purpose in life. And, and that's what we do now. Help people do that. I mean, I do it in people's homes, and I do it in people's companies, and it's a lot of fun.
The No BS Marketing Podcast with Dave Mastovich is brought to you by Mass Solutions. Put our 3-step No BS process to work for you. Visit masssolutions.biz today to take your marketing to another level. It's all about bold solutions, no BS.
Talk about mentors. One of the things in this show is we found that the guests talk at least about 1 or 2, sometimes even 3 different mentors and how they've impacted their life.
Well, I think for me, there's been quite a handful. I've had, like I said earlier, I've had the fortune of having some really great coaches and teachers.
Who was your head high school football coach?
His name was Frank Swarden. He had the people underneath him, the Barlows and Burnett's and folks that just really took me aside, invited me in their home. Actually, just was still in touch with some of them to this day. I actually just had lunch with one about this time last year, so just got together with him as well. I mean, this is a guy, a couple of them went out of their way to take me to extra things during off season, weightlifting, running, things, conditioning like that. Didn't really push me to really excel. They saw something in me before I saw it. College, say our defensive back coach, Dar Huey, probably had the most impact on me. He and actually his wife, I had to take a class with his wife as well, kind of I don't know if it was a remedial class, but it felt like a remedial class. It was one of the ones, you didn't quite make it, but we're going to help you out a little bit. But she was a blast and really encouraging. And
have you stayed in touch with them?
I have not. But how he lived, he didn't have to say anything. He was one of those folks, it's like, wow, I want to be like that. He was just calm, cool, collective, not what you see typically on the side of a football field. He was just very calm, very encouraging. He was passionate, but not in the crazy kind of way. He was, he was very responsible with the gifts that he had. One of the teachers that I have, I think she's still up there. She might not be anymore, but Dr. Kitzrow really encouraged me. I think that's where I really found my niche, was in some of her classes, because she challenged me to think in non-traditional ways. I wasn't going kind of the sociology route until I took one of her classes, and it wasn't multiple choice. It wasn't true or false. It was, what are your thoughts? And I was like, wow, this is kind of neat.
Yeah.
And it was tough, man, because you had to be prepared for her class, because you had to read. I mean, she wasn't light reading. It was theory and behavioral stuff. Right. But I always came prepared to her class. And I liked the fact that, for an hour, that was the exam. For an hour, you just put your thoughts down. How does it apply? How do you apply it practically? And that's what I get paid for today. That's kind of the cool thing about it. And then one that comes to mind in graduate school was another lady, Dr. Barksdale, who pulled me aside and really challenged me with the paradigm that I was holding on to. Said, great, I remember it was after class. We were over here in the cathedral learning. She said, this is great. This is an awesome paper. And I thought my fear was she was going to ask me to leave the class. But she said, there's a couple of things here about your paradigm here that you might want to think about shifting, or you're always going to stay stuck. And I was like, wow, that's pretty profound. So I just, that kept digging and digging and digging. And then, as my relationship with my father got better, he's been a great mentor to me. So, I mean, he's just a guy that I can bounce a lot of ideas off of, that stays pretty calm and collective, and says, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Because I have a tendency maybe not to think, I just do first. And, that relationship and how it has healed through the years has really benefited. To just really take the information that he's learned, especially with his service in the Air Force, and taking some of those ideas and the disciplines that he's had, and really putting them into practice in my life today and for our family.
So those are some great listings of mentors. So then that first job, before you ended up making the leap to do, when people started asking you to do it at their businesses. So when you were doing that first job, what was the first job right out of college?
First job right out of undergrad was in mental health. I found myself after 6 months supervising people, which was awkward because, think about that, out of graduate school, I'm maybe 24, and I'm supervising people twice my age at times, and that's not an exaggeration. Not all of them were that way, but I happened to just get in there and loved what I did. Didn't like the micromanagement, and wanted to kind of I was allowed a lot of leniency probably the first 18 months of, here, make this happen. And we made it happen, and we grew that specific department in that agency tenfold, in a matter of 8 months, and had a lot of great relationships, was doing things, and agreed on one thing with higher administration about work schedule and things like that, of what I could and couldn't do. I'm going to say probably 4, 5, 6 months into it, they went back on it. And I said, I'm done. Best thing ever happened to me. Because they said, well, you can't leave. And I said, watch me. And I walked out that day. There was no, 2 weeks notice. It was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, because then I had to realize that I don't fit. And why don't I fit? Okay, that didn't work for me. It doesn't mean it doesn't work in the same kind of company, and I'm not going to trash any company or anything like that, because it's, it was a great, at that time, it was a great company. It just, I didn't fit, and I couldn't figure out why. And that really led me more into the things that I do now. And there were other things that led me into that, but that was the one thing that really kind of sparked it off. That was like, okay, I do things different. This is not status quo. Can I come up with something that works for me and for other people? And not only for other people, but is it easier?
So do you go to another job similar to that, or is this when you started?
This is really the breakout period. I mean, I took other jobs to kind of start. And at that point, I had already been edging my way out even with an office. And so at that point, 3 offices, right after that, just all really doing therapy, mostly therapy, a little bit of coaching. Got a contract with, a school to do some really, I guess, therapy, life coaching with some of the students. So that was going well. It was going great, and we had some other setbacks. So at that point in time, our family, we were doing great. My wife and I were doing great, and then we finally decided we wanted to have kids, and they're like, "You can't have them." I'm like, "Really?" So why I'm telling you this is that's what pushed me into more of even what I do now, what the connection is with how we think and what we're told, and those things that we hold in our head, that kind of head trash, whatever, it is, that conditioning, and what's really real. And so we set out on a path. I continued to do research into the mind, the body, unconsciousness, all kinds of things. And that's when that program that I do now really started to develop. And we had our first child, quite a few months later, probably about 18 months later, after one miscarriage. And then, my wife's body changed. She was, it wasn't hard the second time. That's why our kids are 18 months apart. But life-changing event happened. She had a stroke when she was pregnant with our daughter. And the advice we got was, you better think about this. It could be devastating to you. This could be a special needs kid. You might think about other options. And we're like, no, there's no other options. We're taking this. This child's going to be ours regardless. And the great story around that is that's my daughter, and she's just absolutely beautiful, gorgeous. You'd never know that she went through that, but I mean, she's got a great mind. She's really smart. No, side effects as they can see, but she's one of my rock stars at home. So
we're talking with Eric Guy of Predictive Synergistic Systems. It's the No BS Marketing Show, and I'm your host, Dave Mastovich. Eric, we've all seen it, and I jokingly say maybe smelled it. Bullshit in the workplace. So give me an example from the past. It could be a company culture, questionable leadership, poor work ethic, bad customer service. Could be a vendor, could be anything. A time when you just had to say, that's BS.
I'm going to go back to the example I just gave you. I mean, I think I was calling BS when that happened. I mean, one of the folks said to me, my supervisor said, well, you can't do this anymore. I said, well, we agreed on this. Like, I'm still doing what I said I would do, and I'm doing it to a higher level. I'm being me. Well, you can't do that anymore. So you're saying I can't be me. And I called BS, and I said, I'm not going to do this. He said, well, then.
Uh-oh.
The battery's dead.
Today has been the day.
Hey.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just called it there. I think the biggest thing that happens inside of a company or even inside of a family is we're not taught, that we're not conditioned to become self-aware. We're just like willy-nilly, you're supposed to do as I say. And we're not encouraged to be authentic to who we are. I mean, we're all perfect the way we are. It's just we don't teach people how to become self-aware and do things with who they are in a responsible way, to be just authentic to who you are. I'm just thinking another one of my mentors and business partner, Predictive Synergistics, who we all know. It's been on your show, Dan Corser. I mean, guys, that is who he is, man. You're getting what shows up, and he's fun to be around, and people like that are fun to be around when you're just being yourself, and you can be you, and I can be me, and I don't have to judge that. And you don't have to judge that, and we just get to do us. It's really kind of cool. And, when I see that inside a work environment where people aren't allowed to do that, that's a really BS environment.
Yeah. So let's talk about the opposite, the learning experience when maybe you were the BS employee, a tough boss, or maybe your communication wasn't what it needed to be. Looking back, when do you think you might have been guilty of some BS?
Well, it's something that... humbly, I have to say I have to continue to work on is, I don't typically need a lot of information to get things done. And there are people that are around me, good people, that need more. And I think in the past, I try not to do it nowadays, or at least when I do it, I'm aware of it. But I think myself as a boss getting upset with somebody who needed more information, who needed me to slow down a little bit, who needed not push so much. Wish I could take those back, but they've been learning moments. But I think as a boss, that's kind of the trap that I fall into. But the nice thing about it is I'm aware of it now, and hopefully don't do it quite as often. And if I do it, I back up and kind of apologize and move from the start again. So
I think that the big phrase that you've talked about so far in the show is self-awareness, because we talk to our guests, and some have used PI and some haven't, but going back and forth with each guest, the self-awareness level is high of people that are strong leaders, and they're able to see their weaknesses, try to avoid those weaknesses, put themselves in situations where it maximizes their strengths, and they're also able to acknowledge their weaknesses and drawbacks.
Absolutely. They did a research study. This has been, I think it was in the mid 2000s, where they actually measured success in people. So they took about 270,000 people, looked at them, and said, what contributes to success? And the two common traits they saw over it doesn't matter where they work, doesn't matter what industry segment, it doesn't matter. The two top traits that all of those successful people had were self-awareness and authenticity. And when you have that, you just naturally develop that in other people. And that's that kind of physiology thing where you say, man, I just want to be around him. I just want to be around Dave. Well, why? Why do you want to work for him? I don't know. There's just something about him because he brings out the best in me. Many people can articulate that, but real great leaders know that, and great leaders do that.
Self-awareness and authenticity. That's Eric Guy of Predictive Synergistic Systems, and I'm Dave Mastovich, and it's the No BS Marketing Show. So, Eric, how can listeners contact you if they'd like to learn more about what you do?
So email Eric Guy at predictivesynergistics.com. Phone number 724-622-8351. And you can either webpage, predictivesynergisticsystems.com or centerforvictory.com to find out both of the sides of the things that I do. So,
Eric, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
It was a great time. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us for the No BS Marketing Show. Visit nobullshitmarketing.biz for show notes, plus additional marketing and messaging resources. Are you signed up for light reading? If not, you need to. You'll receive valuable strategies every other week to improve your marketing and transform your message. It really is light, intended to be read in 2 minutes or less, and it just might trigger bright ideas for you. To sign up, go to masssolutions.biz. Remember, ask yourself, what's the big idea? And build your story around the answer. It's all about bold solutions.